Go to NFL.com/start-sit to see the full list of Michael F. Florio's starts and sits here in the fantasy playoffs. We've got some names that we're not used to seeing this season. We're used to seeing them in the show, not necessarily in this segment. So let's get a start with your quarterbacks, Mike.
Yeah, we were talking before the show about how the Ravens have so much going wrong for them right now. None of it matters if Lamar looks like Lamar again, and last week was the closest he has looked to himself. He ran for 43 yards and a touchdown after not really running the month prior to that. And now he gets the Bengals, who allowed the third most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, who were just lit up by Josh Allen last week. And I know you might be there sitting there like, well, they shut down Lamar. He had his worst career EPA ever against them. Well, yeah, but I'm willing to bet on the talent that is Lamar Jackson in this must-win game against this defense. It's hard to shut him down once, let alone twice in a 3-week span. And then the quarterback that I'm starting in our Fantasy Live playoffs is Brock Purdy. I'm starting him over Jacoby Brissett this week because I just think Purdy is a safe option that most weeks you could expect something like 17 to 19 fantasy points. You won't have much less or much more than that, but he's coming off the bye, and I think that him and his weapons are probably the healthiest they have been in a really long time. And on top of that, the Titans have allowed the 6th most passing yards and touchdowns since week 10. They got lit up by Shador last week. So I'm playing him over Jacoby, like I said. I also think Caleb is someone you could play him over. It's not the best quarterback week, and Purdy is just really safe in a good matchup.
So both of those guys, people have had to make decisions all year. They probably have those backup options. Who's your sit at quarterback that people may have to scramble to try to find somebody to get in?
No quarterback has appeared more in this article this year than Jordan Love, and he has bounced back and forth between being a start and a sit. The last 2 weeks, he was a start. He threw for 7 touchdowns in those games. I'm not expecting that this week, and that is the issue because Jordan Love is more touchdown dependent than some other quarterbacks because he's thrown for fewer than 240 passing yards in each of his last 5 games. So you can't really bank on a lot of yardage there. He doesn't run either a whole bunch, so you can't bank on him getting points with his legs. So touchdowns are what he needs. Well, the Broncos have allowed the 3rd fewest touchdown passes this season. Some quarterbacks I would play over him are Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Baker. I even think, and this is a spicy one, I think Marcus Mariota could be used over Jordan Love in this matchup.
Okay, so and again, with the season kind of backloaded with all these divisional games, it's a nice one with some big fantasy implications as well as some top seed implications, especially in the AFC. Let's go to the tight end position where I'm looking at your start here, Mike, and I'm wondering how I feel about it.
So it's a start from a position and a team that you're used to starting, just not the right guy, right? Like usually you start Mark Andrews of the Ravens tight ends. I do think he's in play this week, but I like Isaiah Likely. You see here, that's a touchdown in my opinion. I know you think so as well, Patrick. If he catches that, his day looks a whole lot different. Plus, on top of that, the week prior, he fumbled one out of the end zone. So his last 2 weeks could have looked a whole lot bigger. But despite that, in their last 3 games, Likely has more targets, catches, yards, and touchdowns than Mark Andrews. He was the Ravens' leading receiver with 95 yards 2 weeks ago against the Bengals. And just a reminder, the Bengals have allowed the most catches, yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points. That's every category to tight ends. So while I think both are in play, Andrews, you're more hoping for a touchdown. I think Likely has the higher ceiling in this one.
Yeah, it's a question of, do you think the Bengals can duplicate that performance, the performance that included having Isaiah Likely with another touchdown that was not a touchdown in the past 3 weeks? So we got Likely starting. Who's your tight end that's a sit?
A bigger name, too. And coming off of his best game in a while, I think Dallas Goedert is a sit this week because, yeah, he scored over 15 fantasy points on Monday night against the Chargers. But I do think that was a little situationally driven, right? Like the Eagles were trailing throughout that game. That game ended up going to overtime. And the Chargers excel at taking away wide receivers, which is probably why they prioritized getting Dallas Goedert the ball more. But he had fewer than 5 fantasy points in each of his 3 games before that, showing that the floor is very low. I don't think the Eagles are going to be trailing in this one. And the Raiders, fewest yards to tight ends since week 10, 3rd fewest on the season.
First week of the postseason in fantasy football. That's why it's time for Michael F. Florio's starts and sits here in week 15 as the stakes could not be higher, Mike. So let's get people a start at the running back position.
RJ Harvey, right? There was a long time in this season where like RJ Harvey looked like he was going to be a bust and wasn't going to live up to those league winner expectations that were put on him. But since the J.K. Dobbins injury, 60% of the snaps, 2/3 of the carries, he's getting the bulk of the pass game work as well. It's led to him scoring over 21 fantasy points in each game since the bye. But the thing here is Dobbins was only getting carries for the Broncos. A running back getting the majority of carries, targets, and goal line usage in a Sean Payton offense has not happened since prime Alvin Kamara. Now, I'm not saying that's what RJ Harvey is going to be, but his upside is becoming a league winner despite the tough schedule. So, yeah. Plus, the Packers in the last 2 months, they have really struggled against the run. I think Harvey is a very strong start. And then I'm going to say Ramondre Stevenson because our producer Alex Wilkes said TreVeyon Henderson. Everyone is starting already. That's who I wanted to talk, but I think both are in play this week against the Buffalo Bills because the last time we saw him, the usage did go Ramondre Stevenson's way, and the Bills have allowed the most rushing touchdowns, and I think that is where Ramondre Stevenson has his big day. Plus, if it's a high-scoring back-and-forth kind of game or one where the Patriots are trailing and chasing points, Stevenson, you can make a case, has been the better receiving option of the two this year. So I think he could see action that way as well. I think both Henderson and Stevenson are in play because the matchup is so great this week.
Yeah, so interesting that you got both Patriots running backs in. That means probably a starter somewhere else is going to the bench. Who is that?
Breece Hall. It pains me to say it because I have Breece Hall in a playoff matchup where I just simply don't have the option to get away. But if you can, I think I would because Breece Hall has shown us he has a low floor in this version of the Jets offense. Single-digit fantasy points, 6 different games this season, and then it's a really hard matchup, right? The Jags have allowed the fewest rushing yards to running backs this season. They don't allow a lot of big plays. And since their bye, their defense has been otherworldly, and they have completely improved against receiving backs. He had 1 target with Brady Cook last week. We don't know who's going to be quarterbacking for the Jets just yet. But if it is Brady Cook, I guarantee you the Jags are going to load up front and make anyone but Breece Hall beat him. So a little bit option dependent, but if you can get away from Breece Hall, I think it's a good idea to avoid this matchup.
I think that last 3-yard pass from Brady Cook where Breece Hall is diving to make a one-handed catch maybe justifies the sit there. Let's go to the wide receiver position. Who is your start?
I'm doubling down here. Look, I said to start Justin Jefferson last week. He had 11 yards. I know he's coming off of his 2 worst statistical career games as a pro, but the Vikings are not going to be up 31-0 in this game. They're going to, I think, be chasing points and having to throw the ball. Plus, this matchup, the Cowboys have allowed the most fantasy points per game, yards, and touchdowns to wide receivers. They've allowed the most of all to out-wide wide receivers and the most of all on deep passes. All are ways that Justin Jefferson can win. I'm willing to bet, if you've survived this far with Justin Jefferson, I'm willing to take a shot on his talent in the best possible matchup he could have. And then I'm starting Terry McLaurin as well. With Marcus Mariota 2 weeks ago, he had 14 targets, so that doesn't really scare me off of Terry. Plus, the Giants have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They really struggle against out-wide wide receivers. And then you might have heard, Terry has a lot of success in this matchup. He's averaged almost 16 fantasy points per game in his career against the Giants. And more than anything, the Giants get lit up through the air each week. So I like Terry in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, he has been an issue for the Giants throughout his career, striking fear in their hearts. Let's strike fear in the hearts of fantasy managers everywhere. Who's a guy they should have felt great about, but maybe should be worried about right now in the playoffs?
I'm sure there's a lot of fantasy managers out there thanking Michael Wilson for getting them into the fantasy playoffs. But you talk about striking fear in the heart. No team strikes more fear into my heart than the Houston Texans. Look, I get it. He's averaged 31 fantasy points per game when Marvin Harrison Jr. is not out there. But that is how good the Texans defense is that I still think you try to get away. Fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. They just shut down Rashee Rice. They've allowed just 52% of passes to out-wide wide receivers to be completed. Only Seattle has allowed less. It's always option dependent when you get with bigger names, but if you're debating between Wilson and someone else, I'm avoiding this matchup. And look, I've played fantasy a lot. we've seen a lot of fun stories come crashing down when they face a defense like this, and I'm fearful that Jacoby and Michael Wilson that's gonna happen to them this year.
Yeah, the regression in the form of the Houston Texans defense.
Exactly.